Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Sam Goodwin has traveled to all 193 countries in the world. He spent 9 weeks in a Syrian prison, and it's during that time that he discovered a lot about gratitude, controlling what you can, and viewing uncertainty as an opportunity. Sam joins us today. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Yes, thanks, Marcus. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Very glad to speak with you. Tell us about your life of travel. How did you get to travel to all 193 countries?
Yeah, so from 2010 to 2020, I'm in those 10 years, much of which I spent living and working overseas. I was in Singapore for 6 years and in Dubai for 1 year. I traveled to every country in the world. Some of it was for work. A lot of it was for pleasure because I was just generally curious about the world. I think curiosity is the most consistent source of innovation. And so that's where a lot of it came from. I think travel is the best education I've ever had as well.
So in that time, what were some of your experiences? What did you learn? How did that expand your intellectual horizons?
Yeah, I mean, travel has taught me so much. I think we learn how to never judge people by the actions of their government. I've learned that people who have the least often give the most, something I found to be true in all corners of the world. I think travel teaches us how to let expectations take a back seat and replace stereotypes with real experiences, and the list goes on.
What did that teach you about the appreciation of the heritage we have in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that there's another place where there's as much opportunity as there is here in the United States. At the same time, one of the things that I learned from traveling to every country in the world is that the overwhelming majority of people are well-intentioned, proud of their country, happy to help others, and it's oftentimes just a small subset of people that give a much larger group a bad reputation.
In your memoir, Saving Sam, you detail a harrowing experience. Tell us what happened to you in 2019.
Yeah, in May of 2019, I had traveled to 180 of 193 countries, and it was at that point when I went to Syria, and it was just 2 hours after arriving. I was walking through a roundabout on the way to meet up with my guide when all of a sudden a black pickup truck abruptly pulled up next to me. Two armed men jumped out of the back seat and instructed me to get inside. And the men in the vehicle, they accused me of espionage, of being an American spy and collaborating with terrorists. And they went on to hold me in some pretty uncomfortable situations for 9 weeks. And I can talk more about that if you're interested, but I thank God, thanks to a long list of people who worked tirelessly, I was released on July 26th and was able to come home.
What happened? How did that confusion come about?
Yeah, actually today it's still not 100% sure on all the details of why I was targeted or why exactly this happened. Could have been wrong place, wrong time. Could have been travel history, or combination of a range of things. But I was accused of being some kind of threat to their national security, and just so grateful that the situation ended peacefully.
So tell us then, what was it like being in a Syrian prison? Share with us the details of that experience, what that did to you.
Yeah, I was scared, confused. I had no information or anyone to help. I was desperately trying to understand what was happening. I was stunned and in disbelief about what had happened in just a few short hours. My life had spiraled out of control in the most terrifying of ways. I felt exactly the way they wanted me to, hopeless, utterly cut off from any control of my life. I was in an 8x8 cell. It had no window. It was all concrete. I had nothing but a small blanket to lay on the concrete floor as a bed. And I spent the first 27 days in solitary confinement. I was then moved for the second month to a more general population type situation. But that was kind of from a high level what those 9 weeks look like.
As you were going through this, as you got past some of these initial concerns, the fears, the doubts, the uncertainties, in your memoir, you start going deeper into yourself and explaining the transformation that occurred. Share with us about that.
Yeah, in that cell, particularly in solitary confinement, there were a range of things that I leaned on for strength. I leaned on perspectives that I developed from traveling to different corners of the world, which provoked gratitude for just the basic food and water I was being given. I leaned on skills and traits I developed from being a competitive athlete, the mental toughness, critical thinking, resilience. How often have we had a boss or a coach tell us, control what you can control? I leaned on this belief that I had a purpose in life and a desire to see family and friends again. Most importantly, in that cell, I leaned on my faith. Everything had been taken from me: my material possessions, my communication, my freedom. But no matter what, I knew that my faith was absolute, and that's what I had to hold on to when everything else was taken. And what I learned is that faith isn't always easy, but it is always available.
In those 9 weeks, you didn't have access to the usual, what we would consider the trappings of the faith, anywhere from the scriptures to access to worship, communal worship of Christ. How did that affect your growth in faith?
Yeah, my prayers became kind of this uninterrupted conversation with God. I was constantly talking to him, pacing back and forth, saying things out loud. Even though they told me not to talk, I said, God, I'm here, I'm listening. What are you trying to tell me today? What can I learn today? What are perhaps the positives about my situation today? And my number one prayer was always, God, please keep my situation safe and peaceful. Please keep me physically unharmed. My second prayer was then about the timeline. So if this was all going to end peacefully, then the next question was when. And this was the prayer that for me became the most tricky and intense. I remember almost positioning it as like a business deal. I said, God, I know you have a plan, but is it possible? Would you consider an adjustment to the timeline? Can that work with your plan? And then I ended all of my prayers by saying the rosary, and I would use my fingers. I would dedicate each decade to something different. I prayed for my family, my friends, anybody who I thought might be working to get me out of the situation. I prayed for world peace. I prayed very hard for the courage to forgive my captors, and through that I discovered that I was working to forgive people who weren't even sorry, and that's strength. And forgiveness, I found, is not a feeling; it's a choice.
That deeper growth into yourself started changing. It was 9 weeks, and those were probably 9 of the longest weeks of your life. Share with us how you got out of the situation.
So one of the most overwhelming things for me when I was released was learning about everything that happened on the outside while I was trapped on the inside, none of which I knew anything about. And you referenced my book a minute ago called Saving Sam. And when I went to write that, what I realized was that half the story wasn't even mine to tell. It was what my family went through and what they had to deal with. And in a nutshell, there are no diplomatic ties between Washington and Damascus. And so the U.S. government, although very supportive of my family, was struggling to be super effective with the case. And so it turned out that my family, particularly my sister, she reached out to her former college roommate, who, just for support, who is Lebanese, and her family actually had a connection to Lebanese intelligence, and they were able to go to their counterparts in Damascus and actually mediate my release. So it was a situation where a lot of kind of agencies, authorities, private sector security companies were kind of unsure exactly how to be effective. But my sister was able to identify a path to get an American hostage released from captivity in the Middle East.
Sam, I'm very grateful for this time. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm looking forward to finding out more details about this. I've been talking with Sam Goodwin. His best-selling memoir, Saving Sam, is about the time he was incarcerated in Syria for 9 weeks. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.